On a cold, rainy night in 1971, somewhere over the dark forests of the Pacific Northwest, a man stepped to the back of a passenger jet, opened the rear door in mid-flight and jumped out into the storm. He was carrying $200,000 in ransom cash strapped to his body and a parachute on his back. And from the moment he disappeared into that freezing black sky, no one has ever seen him again. He gave a false name when he bought his ticket. History would come to know him by a slight mistake in the reporting. A name that became legend, D.B. Cooper. It is the only unsolved skyjacking in the history of American aviation. And more than 50 years later, we still do not know who he was or whether he even survived the fall. It began quietly the day before Thanksgiving in November of 1971. A man in a neat business suit and a thin black tie walked up to a ticket counter at the airport in Portland, Oregon. He was calm, ordinary, forgettable. Middle-aged, dark hair, a plain white shirt, a raincoat over his arm. He paid cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle, a short hop of only about 30 minutes. He gave his name as Dan Cooper. He carried a briefcase and looked to everyone who saw him like a tired businessman heading home. He took his seat near the back of the plane and ordered a drink. Shortly after takeoff, he did something that changed everything. He handed a note to one of the flight attendants. She assumed it was a lonely man passing her his phone number and slipped it into her pocket without reading it. Calmly, quietly, he leaned toward her and told her she had better look at the note. When she read it, her blood ran cold. It said in plain words that he had a bomb. He opened his briefcase just enough to show her the inside. A tangle of wires and what looked like red cylinders, like sticks of dynamite. Then he closed it and told her exactly what he wanted. His demands were precise. $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck standing by to refuel the plane the moment it landed in Seattle. And he wanted all of it, without any tricks. What was remarkable was how calm he remained. He was polite. He was patient. He ordered another drink and paid his tab, even trying to hand over the change. He behaved less like a desperate criminal and more like a man executing a plan he had thought through completely. As the airliner circled Seattle, the authorities on the ground scrambled to meet his demands. The airline decided to cooperate fully. There were dozens of other passengers aboard, and no one wanted to risk that briefcase. The money was gathered, 10,000 $20 bills, a heavy bundle of cash. And crucially, before it was handed over, agents made a record of every serial number on every single bill. That decision would matter for decades. The plane landed in Seattle. The cash and the parachutes were brought aboard, and in exchange, Cooper kept his word. He released all of the passengers and 2 of the flight attendants, letting them walk safely off the plane. But he kept the pilots and 1 flight attendant and gave them a new set of instructions. They were to take off again and fly south toward Mexico. Low and slow, with the landing gear down and the wing flaps set, as if preparing to land the whole way. These were not random requests. They were the instructions of someone who understood aircraft. He wanted the plane flying as slowly and as low as it safely could. He was setting the stage for something. As the jet climbed back into the stormy night sky and turned south, Cooper gave his final order. He sent the last flight attendant to the front of the plane, into the cockpit, and told her to close the curtain behind her. Alone now in the darkened rear cabin, he went to work. He lowered the rear staircase of the aircraft, a set of stairs that folded down from the tail, out into the open air, rushing past at nearly 200 miles an hour. Somewhere over the black wilderness of southwest Washington, in freezing rain and roaring wind, with the ransom money strapped to his body and a parachute on his back, Dan Cooper walked down those stairs and stepped off into nothing. Up front, the crew felt a change in the pressure of the cabin, a small bump as the aircraft's balance shifted. They did not dare look back. When the plane finally landed and the police boarded, the rear cabin was empty. Cooper was gone. All he left behind were a few clues, a black clip-on tie, 2 of the 4 parachutes, a handful of cigarette butts, and a mystery that would consume investigators for the next half a century. The manhunt that followed was one of the largest in the country's history. The area beneath his likely flight path was vast. Hundreds of square miles of dense forest, deep ravines and cold rivers. Search teams combed the wilderness on foot. Aircraft flew overhead. Later, they even searched the bottoms of lakes. And in all of it for years, they found absolutely nothing. No parachute, no money, no body, no trace of the man at all. The question that gripped the nation was simple. Did he make it? Could anyone survive that jump? At night, in a storm, into rugged terrain he could not see, wearing a business suit and dress shoes. Some experts said it was almost impossible. The conditions were brutal. He jumped into freezing rain at high speed with no way to steer toward a safe landing into some of the most unforgiving country in the region. He may not even have had the right gear. One of the parachutes he was given, it was later realized, was a non-functional training model sewn shut. If he had grabbed the wrong one, he was doomed before he left the plane. And yet others were not so sure. The calm, methodical way he had planned everything suggested a man who knew exactly what he was doing. Perhaps a skydiver, perhaps a paratrooper, perhaps someone who had rehearsed this in his mind 100 times. For years, the trail stayed completely cold. And then, in 1980, a young boy on a family camping trip along a river made a discovery that reignited the entire case. Digging in the sand of a riverbank, he uncovered 3 rotting bundles of $20 bills, weathered, decayed but still stacked together. When the serial numbers were checked, they matched. It was Cooper's ransom money. It was the first and only physical trace of the crime ever found, but instead of solving the mystery, it only deepened it, because the money raised more questions than it answered. It was found miles from where investigators believed Cooper had landed, along a river that did not fit neatly into any theory. How had it gotten there? Had he buried it? Had it washed downstream? Had he died and the elements scattered his fortune? And it was only a few $1,000s, a small fraction of the total. The rest of the $200,000 and the man who took it has never turned up. Not one other bill from that ransom has ever surfaced anywhere in the world. That fact alone is extraordinary. Every serial number was on record. Banks watched for them for years, and yet in more than 50 years, the money simply vanished from circulation as completely as the man himself. Over the decades, the investigation churned through an enormous list of possibilities. Hundreds of people were considered. Dozens confessed on their deathbeds. Family members came forward, certain that a mysterious relative had been the hijacker. Some suspects were compelling. Men with parachuting experience, men who resembled the sketches, men who suddenly came into money, or who told strange stories, or who simply disappeared from their own lives around that time. But every single one of them, in the end, was ruled out, or could never be proven. No confession ever matched the evidence. No suspect was ever charged. The case remained stubbornly, completely open. The physical clues that survived only teased the investigators. The black tie he left behind carried microscopic particles, rare metals and materials that hinted he might have worked in a specialized industry, perhaps aerospace. It was a tantalizing thread. It suggested a man who was not just a random criminal, but someone with technical knowledge, someone who might have understood both aircraft and the materials of a certain kind of factory. And yet it led nowhere conclusive. Eventually, after 45 years and thousands of leads, the official investigation was formally closed. Not solved, just closed. The authorities admitted they had exhausted every reasonable path and set the case aside. But it never truly ended. Because a mystery like this does not belong only to the investigators. It belongs to everyone who has ever heard it. And amateur sleuths, engineers, and obsessives have carried it forward ever since. They have reflown the route in simulators. They have analyzed the money, the tie, the wind, and the weather of that night. They have argued over every second of the flight. And still, the central question remains exactly where it started. Who was he? And did he live, or did he die alone in the dark forest, his fortune scattering into the rivers while the world searched in the wrong place? If he died, then somewhere out in that wilderness, the rest may still be lying hidden. Bones and rotting cash beneath the roots and the rain, a secret the forest has kept for over 50 years. But if he lived, if he somehow guided himself down through that storm, buried most of the money, walked out of those woods, and simply went back to an ordinary life, then he did something no other person has ever done. He committed a perfect crime. He took a fortune from the sky, stepped out of a plane, and dissolved into the American landscape so completely that not even the full power of a nationwide manhunt could ever find him. And he became something rare in the modern world. Not a monster, not a killer, but a genuine, enduring enigma. A polite man in a business suit who bent the impossible to his will and then simply ceased to exist. It is that strange, almost gentlemanly quality that has kept the legend alive. He harmed no one. He was courteous to the crew. He seemed, in his calm, to be playing a game whose rules only he understood. And then he won it, or died trying, and took the answer with him into the clouds. Every generation since has picked up the thread, convinced that this time the truth is finally within reach, and every generation has come up empty. 9,000 feet over the wilderness, in the freezing dark of a storm, an ordinary-looking man made a leap that no rational person should have survived and turned himself into a permanent question mark. The plane landed safely. The crew were unharmed. The world got its money's worth of legend. And the one thing that was supposed to be certain, that a man cannot simply vanish from a moving airplane, was quietly, completely undone. Somewhere below that flight path, in the rivers and the roots and the rain, the last of the answer may still be waiting. But for now, and perhaps forever, D.B. Cooper remains exactly what he made himself that night. A man who fell out of the sky and was never seen again.